chapter 13. And we went over all of this last week, so we went back to chapter 12, and then we got up, well, I thought through 13, but we will try to get to at least the end of chapter 13 by the end of our time together. Chapter 12, Revelation chapter 12, we identify the woman as who? Israel. Very good. And then the red dragon, Satan himself. We talked about in verse 3, then other signs appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads. We refer to those heads as nations. And then he continues to say, in 10 horns, we identify the horns as rulers. Okay? And then in verse 5, it says, and she gave birth to a son, a male child, and that, of course, is referring to Christ. So when we look at verse 7 of chapter 12, it says, and there was a war in heaven. We talked about this great cosmic war that was taking place in the heavenly realms. It says, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. And the dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. So they were kicked out of heaven. And it says in verse 9, and the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who does what? We talked a lot about his deceptive nature. That's what he does. He does that regularly. He deceives people. And if we're not careful, in fact, he is not anti-Christian in the sense that he won't use Christian people. Amen? He comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and there is no demilitarized zone. There is nobody that is safe from the schemes of Satan. Amen? It says, he deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So Satan has help. His demons and all of the stuff that they do, they're all controlled by him. Verse 10 of chapter 12 of Revelation, then I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ has come to the accuser of the brethren, has been thrown down, who accuses them before God day and night. And so we talked about, just like in Job, where Satan had access to God, so still, during this period of time, it seems that Satan will have access. So he's coming to do what he does, and that is to accuse the brethren. He does that how often? All the time. There's not a time when he's not heaping accusations against us. The good news is what? We have an advocate. Who is our advocate? Christ. Amen. We are acquitted of all the charges based on the blood of Jesus Christ. Amen. And then it says, and they overcame him, and particularly those in the tribulation period, directly speaking about those in chapter 7, speaking of the Jews, the 144,000 who were evangelists, because we know that the church is where at this time? They're in heaven. The church has been called up in between chapters 3 and chapter 4 of Revelation. You see no idea of the church in Revelation after chapter, in between 3 and 4. You don't see the church because the church has been called up. Okay? And so those that have been protected by God, the 144,000, and those that have come to faith as a result of the witness the two witnesses who are now in heaven, as well as the 144,000 Jews who are also evangelists preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb, by the blood of the Lamb, and because of the word of their testimony. And they did not love their life even when faced with death. And so we talked about this, that there will be many believers at that time that will lose their faith. Lose their lives because of their faith. Okay? The encouragement for them is to hold on. By the time we get to chapter 14, we'll see the reward for their faithfulness. And so in verse 12 he says, for this reason, rejoice, O heavens, you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. His time is very, very short. Okay, after the 3.5 years, of course, all the calamities that's going on during the tribulation period, a third of the land, a third of the sea, a third of mankind, a lot of death, a lot of destruction. We spoke some time before about there will probably be a lot of diseases going on because of the decay of decaying bodies, and a lot of rats basically spreading a whole lot of diseases and so on and so forth during that time period. So in verse 13, it talks about the woman. It says in verse 13 of chapter 12, then when the dragon saw that he was thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman. The woman is referring to who again? Israel. She gave birth to the male child, but the two wings of the great eagle were given to the woman so that she could fly into the wilderness to her place where she was nourished for a time and a half from the presence of the serpent. So we talked about this dragon is going to pursue Israel, but God is going to protect Israel. Amen? In fact, it goes on to say in 15, and the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman, so that he might cause her to be swept away with the flood. But the earth helped the woman. In other words, God provided some provision for Israel from the serpent. Okay? It's not real clear how he did it, but it says the earth helped the woman. The earth helped Israel. The earth protected Israel, and the earth opened his mouth and drank up the river with the dragon poured out of his mouth. So whatever the enemy was pouring out of his mouth, the earth opened up and it aided the children of Israel so that the children of Israel wouldn't be drowned. Could be almost like in Exodus, how God opened the Red Sea and allowed the children of Israel to walk through on dry land. God controls all the elements, amen? And he's able to protect his people. Verse 17, so the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children. And we're living in the last days, and we know that the enemy is still making war with Israel. Israel is constantly under attack by someone. America has done well to reinforce their allegiance with Israel, because the covenant that God made with Abraham is those those who are with Israel, he will bless those who are with Israel. So we do well. God has always had his finger in his protection for his people. It says, so the dragon was enraged with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her children, who keep the commandments of God and hold the testimony of Jesus. The two qualities of those who are with God at this particular time is, one, they keep the commandments. And then the second thing is they hold to the testimony of Jesus. Okay? chapter 12 in summary. Any questions before we move to chapter 13? All right. Now, we started this on last week. We talked, there enters another character into the scene in chapter 13, verse 1. It says, and the dragon, we identify the dragon as Satan. It says, and the dragon stood on the sand of the seashore. Then I saw a beast coming out of the sea. Now, there is another beast that's coming, it says, out of the sea, and we identified that beast last week as the Antichrist, absolutely. Then I saw a beast coming out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and on his horns were 10 diadems, and on his head were blasphemous names. And the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power. And so in verse 2 we see this common word that keeps coming up is what? Which lets us know that it is what? Simile, which is, in other words, speaking what type of language? Metaphoric language. Very good. Got some good English students in here. And so we also identified that these animal-like qualities that this beast would have were representing different nations. We said the bear or the leopard was a metaphor for ancient Greece. Okay? We said the bear was a metaphor for the Medo-Persian Empire. The lion was metaphor for the ancient Babylonian Empire. And then, did I miss one? No. Okay, yeah. And so this is one beast that has all of these different qualities, but he identifies in verse 2, he says, the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were, and we said this leopard metaphorically refers to who? Greek. And then he says, and his feet were like those of a bear, referring to Medo-Persia, and then his mouth like the mouth of a lion, referring to Babylonian. It says, and the dragon gave him, that is, this beast who is referring to who? Antichrist. The Antichrist. The reason why I keep asking y'all these questions is because you can kind of get lost in all of this language. So I want you to know who's who and who's doing what. It says, and the dragon gave him his power. So the beast is the Antichrist, and the Antichrist gets his power from Satan. And Satan is referred to as the dragon. So Satan powers all of this evil influence in these last days. Amen? All of this, listen, this last shooting, who do you think? The devil. Absolutely. Who else would do something crazy? Listen, folk are losing their minds because we're living in the last days. This is talking about the tribulation period, but we're living in the last days, and Satan's time still is short. So it's not, I've said this before, it's not going to get better, it is going to get worse. I believe it's Matthew 24 talks about that. It's going to get worse and worse. Okay, people say, well, it's because we took prayer out of school and all of that, and it could be. You know, I think we should, listen, we still should be praying in school. There are no laws that really keep us from doing what we need to do. You in the school, pray. That's right. Amen. And so he goes on and says, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. The dragon, Satan, gave him the beast. He says he gave him his throne and great authority. Interesting. And then in verse 3, He says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain. We talked about this last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We did.
All right, so let me just move on pretty quickly. So y'all gonna help me teach through this very quickly, all right? And it says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been slain, and his fatal wound was healed. So we said that this Antichrist, it would appear that he dies and is risen from the dead. It would appear that way. Because we know that Satan is a deceptive, it is very likely